Let us start then with an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples today. Let me then introduce our two lovely speakers. So we have with us Sanne and Gabrielle. They are both PhD students at the University of Amsterdam. Sanne is affiliated with the Institute of Information Law and has background in artificial intelligence. Gabrielle, on the other hand, is also affiliated with RTL Netherlands. So Sanne is, what are you doing? Maybe you could actually briefly tell us what your research focus is, rather than me trying to rephrase your bio on the spot.
Yeah, actually my research focus is what we're going to talk about today. So we really try to look at normative diversity in news evaluations, news recommendations, and mostly my job is to talk to different types of people, social scientists, journalism studies, communication scientists, and talk about, okay, what do you think it needs to be, and try to translate that into a, computable thing.
Great, thank you so much. And Gabrielle?
For me, it's a mix of more applied and theoretic AI. One of them is diversity in news recommendation, and another topic is about using metrics as losses for neural networks, and another topic is video to music AI.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. Feel free to take it away then.
All right, then, yeah, I think I will start then. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us today. As said before, my name is Sanne Vrijenhoek, and we will present our interdisciplinary work radio for you today, which is a collaboration between University of Amsterdam, Faculty of Law, Faculty of Computer Science, and RTL, which is a Dutch media company. Next slide, please. And first off, I would like to talk a little bit about news in general. News recommender systems are right now studied extensively for their quite unique characteristics, such as data sparsity, the short shelf life of the articles that need to be recommended. However, what news we show to a user may in a way shape their worldview, and as such also have an effect on things like deciding who to vote for or choosing a good cause to support, etc. And gatekeeping what news is shown to users has traditionally been done by newsrooms and its news editors. And they would decide which news items have priority over others, and news recommender systems would in part be taking over an important part of this role, but without the means to evaluate and control them in the same way that we would news editors. And because of this, many news organizations are fairly hesitant of adopting this relatively new technology, which is a shame because personalized news recommendations could also maybe do a lot of good. Next slide, please. So what we need is a way to evaluate our news recommendations on their normative diversity. And we define normative diversity as enabling citizens to fulfill their role in a democratic society. And a normatively diverse news recommender could, for example, not limited to increase engagement of citizens with the news, and not just with entertainment or sports articles that people like to read, but also, for example, by presenting them with topics that are in some way specifically relevant to them, maybe with opinions they have not encountered before, with local news, or maybe even by catering to people's specific stylistic and complexity needs. Next slide, please. And in practice, this full procedure could work like this. And we think that news organizations themselves need to agree on what the goal of a recommendation should be. And this does not necessarily have to be one singular thing. You can have multiple recommender systems running in parallel. But after this has been decided, editorial teams and data engineers need to work together in determining how this goal would be expressed in concrete metrics. And our goal with this contribution is that we start building a bridge between data and editorial teams by allowing maybe, on the one hand, data teams to evaluate the recommendations based on editorial principles, but also on the other hand, by providing editorial teams with more understanding of what happens within a data team. Next slide. So the first two questions, oh no, wait, sorry. This is kind of where, for our purposes, the current standard of diversity falls short, and we will refer to the current standard of diversity as descriptive diversity, which is commonly implemented as an intralist distance. But this notion raises a lot of questions, because what does it mean for two articles to be different or similar? Is more distance always better? And maybe it's also a bit of a philosophical question, because diversity is not a concept that stands on its own. It's always a question of you're diverse in relation to something else. And this means that in order to have some kind of notion of diversity, you need to look beyond what is just in the recommendation itself. And next slide. Actually, no, yeah, never mind. Let's leave it here. And these first two questions have been the topic of some earlier work, and where we proposed a set of diversity metrics grounded in democratic theory. And it will sometimes be necessary to refer back to the concepts developed there, but with regards to time, we cannot really go into that more. But I think on the previous slide, there was a QR code for if anybody is interested. So instead, what we propose is a base formalization of diversity based on F divergence, which is here expressed as D divergence between P and Q. And with this, we look at a recommendation as a distribution of values, as opposed to just comparing means, for example. And this means that there are a couple of decisions that we need to make, because first we need to choose the relevant features. What do you put into your distribution? And this could be, for example, maybe political actors mentioned in an article, and we need to identify those in our recommendations. And this would then be the P distribution. And next, we need to choose the relevant context distribution, or what do we compare our recommendation to? And this could, for example, be maybe all the items that were available at that point in time, or a user's reading history, or what was recommended to other users. And last, we need to determine whether we need to the divergence between these two distributions to be high, low, or something in the middle. And these choices, all of these choices, could be inspired by the metrics and the theory proposed in the earlier mentioned work, but they're also flexible for different interpretations or goals. In summary, we do not propose a universal norm for diversity, but rather a procedure of expressing a type of diversity that is expressive of your specific use case and goals. And now Gabrielle will talk a little bit more about the specifics of the divergence calculation and our example implementation on the Microsoft News Dataset.
Thanks, Anna. Remember, Sana defines DPQ, so we have a generic divergence measure, with Q the recommendation set and P the reference set. Now we set up some mathematical requirement. We said, okay, why not make this a traditional distance measure with these nice properties of identity, symmetry, and triangle inequality. Second, we also said it would be nice if it was bounded by, if our metric of divergence was bounded by 0 and 1, so we can compare different recommendation algorithms. And then finally, let's make this rank aware, because we are in a setting where, again, people scroll on the website, they end up on a news website, they scroll on the website, and there's just a propensity to scroll. And at some point, people get tired of scrolling, or maybe someone clicks on the first item that they see, and then they never see the rest. So rank is very important in that context. So we looked a little bit at the literature of divergence, and we found our VAE friends who use KL a lot, even at training time. And they have some nice illustration, because they really illustrate how KL divergence is not symmetric. So we stole that image, and that QR code is here to the original blog post. What's important is in our case, we didn't want to make a statement about what should be. Again, remember on the top right, what should be P and what should be Q, what should be the reference set and what should be the recommendation set, and then which one should be compared to what. And because we didn't want to make such a statement, we wanted it, to have a symmetric divergence. So that's why we went instead for Jensen Shannon divergence. And then the second point is the rank awareness that I mentioned before. So there you can make something rank aware by simply decaying the importance of elements as you go down. You can decay in a traditional learning to rank setting in an MMR rate or an NDCG rate. You can see on the image what it means. MMR decreases a lot more at the beginning. Importantly is this ... at the bottom right. If really you want to decay and you have log data, you know what the users do, maybe you can do this in a click model based. So maybe you actually check what is happening on your website, what is the propensity to click at different positions, and then give that actual propensity as a discount rather than a generic discount. So to sum it up, we have a rank aware F divergence. What do we mean by F divergence? That's a concept that's been defined in 2006. And it's just something that's quite suitable because it's a mathematical concept that allows you to summarize different kinds of divergences, including KL divergence that I mentioned before from our VAE friend, but also Jensen Shannon, also Jacquard distance, etc. And this is what we call our radio framework. Is that idea, or what is part of our radio framework? It's really the total rank aware F divergence. And then what F allows you to do is to you can basically replace that F with certain variables, and that gives you your Jensen Shannon distance, which is a lot harder to write and to express if you don't have that F here. With two limitations. First, we cannot in that discrete formulation we cannot bin values. Sorry, we have to bin values. And then the second limitation is that we cannot induce a relation between categories. And the star stands for rank awareness. We looked a little bit, this is just one of the plots. We looked at a lot of plots of sensitivity. So what happens now if we try Jensen Shannon or KL divergence? What happens if we are rank aware or not rank aware? And this is an example where by inducing rank awareness, we get more realistic results, especially for the random case. It's also the case if we look at different recommender strategies. So we benchmarked a lot of neural recommenders, and then a most popular recommender and random recommender. And Elster is was the best performing neural recommender, so that's why it ends up on this plot. And this is just to show what happens when you measure metrics at different ranking sets. So again, this is our final table of results. We just look at two columns in our final table of results to simplify the argument. We have on the top, we have metrics, we have algorithms. It's nice that I can point with the mouse. We have here we have 4 neural algorithms. Here we have just the most popular pieces of news that appear recommended, and here we just have random recommendations. And then we look at what happens on our metrics that we measure with the radio framework. So for calibration on topic, which means just how divergence are the topic, we can see that the non-neural methods are actually performing better. And the reason for that is that the neural methods, they learn from the history of the user, and it's very likely that the neural recommender will recommend something that's similar to the history of the user. And the history of the user is part of certain topics, so you would expect certain topics to appear again. So the idea is then to look at below and look at the norms. So if you are, if you think that you are of the liberal mindset, then recommendation should be tailored to the user's preferences. So then you would expect low divergence in topic calibration, and thus you would favor neural network recommenders. But then if you take another example, and you say you are part of the critical model, then we go here on the right and we look at, okay, this is where the divergence is the highest. So high. So this is what we expect for alternative voices, and in that case, high divergence in the presence of alternative voices means, well, high alternative voices, and then it means that maybe we should favor random recommender systems to make sure that alternative voices appear effectively in the people's recommendations. And so again, here on the left we have norms, and here on the top we have the metrics depending on the norms. The take-home message is not to say that neural recommenders are bad. It's just to say that neural recommenders can be suitable for certain aspects of diversity, but they need more optimization for others. And I'll come back to that just now. So first, so what are the next steps? First, there are many relevant features that are hard to extract in our preparation pipeline, NLP pipeline. First, how do you approximate the degree of activation? Or what is the political standpoint? Or how do we assess the political standpoint? How do we assess minorities? That's a very hard topic. For example, how do you decide if you see someone that you can't find on Wikipedia? How do you decide what is that person's political standpoint? It's also tempting to assign them to a minority, because then maybe you would think, if that person is not on Wikipedia, maybe it's a minority. So it's all these kinds of troubles. And then second, we do not define a universal vision of normative diversity. What does it mean even to be normatively diverse? And that we don't have a reference point outside of our data set when we measure diversity. Metrics, and then now I come back to what I said earlier. So maybe we could use these metrics as a loss for recommender optimization rather than just the post hoc evaluation. But it was important here to lay a first step towards diversity first at evaluation time. And then finally, we are really keen to collaborate with news organizations, and we're going to mention that I think later. But there's really concrete things coming up. And finally, my last slide. Thank you for listening. Happy to hear thoughts, ideas, comments. Here are our Twitter handles, although Twitter is over, I heard. I should have put my Mastodon handle. Have a nice, hope to hear interesting stuff. On the left is the link to the code and the paper.